Welcome to the Bearded Finisher Podcast, your one-stop show for all things finishing and coatings. Your host, Zach, and a variety of industry experts will guide you through the art of perfecting your finishing and business game. From seasoned pros to fresh faces, get ready for tips, tricks, and trends to elevate your knowledge and business to the next level.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Bearded Finisher Podcast. I'm your host, Zach. On today's episode, we have got Mr. Denny Jahnz with Cabinet Renew. What's going on, Denny?
Hey, just living the dream every single day.
There you go. How are things going in your world up in Minnesota?
Pretty good.
You guys getting decent weather?
Yeah, the weather's beautiful. It's going to be like 80 degrees today.
Whoa, man, that's nice. We had that this weekend. Now it's supposed to storm the rest of the week.
I think that's coming in here tomorrow.
So I was looking up, just kind of checking, you're looking at your LinkedIn and all that stuff. And I want to hear your story and how you got into coatings. But one thing caught my eye. You were an EMT and a mayor.
Yep.
So curiosity's got me. How do you go from being a mayor and an EMT to the coatings world? Tell us your story.
At that time, I was living in a town of about 300 people. So sometimes being a mayor in that town was more like a community service sentence than it is an actual title or position. So, I was a fireman. I did 20 years as a volunteer fireman, and then same with the ambulance. It was a volunteer service, so we got very low call volume. And when somebody needed the ambulance, you would get the call, and then whoever could respond would respond. But going back to high school, I was actually very, very weak in woodworking. I took a woodworking class in high school and I never finished it. I think I made a gun rack, and I think it followed me around until my son was like maybe 6 or 8 years old. And I think we finally finished it. So I wasn't really that accomplished in the woodworking field. I was much better in the biology and science sector.
Okay.
And that's all that was, I was supposed to go in the Army when I was in high school. I was in a delayed entry program, and my senior year I was wrestling and I blew my knee out. And then this was one of those times where the recruiters were trying to send people through fraudulently, and so the recruiter knew that I had a knee surgery, knew what I had, and he didn't tell the Army that any of that happened. And then about 2 weeks before I was supposed to process out, he shows up at my door and he's like, so he goes, how bad do you want to get in the Army? And I said, well, I'm kind of committed now, aren't I? He says, well, he looks at me right in the eye and he says, well, if you want to get in the Army, you don't tell him you had knee surgery. I'm like, huh?
Wait.
Like what? So I go up to the processing center, and we get up there, and actually it's kind of funny because there's a guy that was in my class in school, and we were a pretty small town at the time. It was like 1,800 population town. So we had like 30 people in our class, and one of the guys who was in my class moved away when we were sophomores. And literally that day when I went to process out, he was in line with me to process out with the Army. I mean, how often does something like that happen, right? So
that's small.
So we get up there and we go through the thing, and if anybody's been in the Army, when you go to process out, they come through and they have you do the duck walk thing, and they ask if you had any changes in your physical health or whatever. So they asked me that, and I'm like, yeah. Well, what happened? Well, I had knee surgery 3 months ago. So there you are standing in your underwear in the processing station, and he goes to tell you to sit down. And so you go sit down, and then the rest of the group does their thing and gets out of there and leaves. And then the doctor comes back in. He's like, why don't you sit down? We got to talk about this. And he's like, how come you didn't tell anybody in the Army that you had all this? I'm like, well, I told him when I did it, told him that I was going to do it, all this stuff. And I listed off all the dates and whatnot. So then he had to send me down to the major of the whole processing center, and I had to give him my story. And he's like, oh, okay. So then I had a great job. It was going to be a unit supply specialist, right? So not any combat, not anything like that. Pretty decent job. And then they said, well, we got to renegotiate your contract now because your position won't be out, and you got to wait 6 months after you have surgery to get in. So they put me in the infantry, and that was what I was going to be. And then they said, come back in 6 months and get reevaluated, because if you have surgery, you got to wait 6 months, or at least at that time, you had to wait 6 months after a surgery to be able to go in. So I came back after the 6 months after the surgery, and then they evaluated my knee and said, that's not good enough. If you want to have another surgery to fix it, you can. Otherwise, we don't want you. So that was the extent of my military career. So at that point, it was too late to go to college because it was like August, and so I couldn't get in any colleges. So I started working in a restaurant, and I actually spent about 10 years in the restaurant business. I started out as like an assistant manager when I was young. They promoted me right after I turned 19, and then I started working as a training manager. So when they opened up new restaurants, I would be the one that went there and got the crew trained and set up the equipment and all that kind of stuff. So I did a lot of those things. And then, like I said, I did that for about 10 years. And then I was going to get married to my gorgeous wife. And our wedding was going to be like 300 miles away, right on the shores of Lake Superior, northern Wisconsin. And so I asked for a couple extra days off on my request to go there with a manager I was stationed with at the time. And he never said anything about it. And then like a week, I think it was usually put out the schedule on like Thursday. He didn't put out the schedule until Saturday. He came and put it in. He didn't say anything to me, and he had me scheduled those days right up until the day of my wedding. And so I called him.
No way.
I called him and I brought him back in, and it got a little bit heated because I was pretty pissed, because I was like, you didn't even have the respect to even talk to me or say anything to me. I don't understand what you're doing, And literally before that, I had called every manager in the district that we were in for that restaurant chain because I had trained every one of them, for some of the stuff that they did in the restaurants. And I knew them all, and every one of them said, well, if I knew that you needed it, I could have sent somebody to fill in for you, because I'd done that for a lot of them. If they had somebody out, I was one that they would send to another store to fill in if they needed it. So I had a pretty good network, but this manager was, I don't know if he's doing a power play or what he was doing, but it's kind of dumb on his part. At any rate, so he came in, and then things got a little bit heated. And at one point, I don't even remember what it was. He said something to me, and then I think he laid a hand on me. And then I took my one hand and I took my right hand and I jacked him up against the wall and held him like that. And I grabbed the phone with my other hand and put it to his ear and told him to dial a district manager. We were having a conversation at that time. And so that ended my career in the restaurant business.
Whoa. I mean, fair enough.
So that was the end of the restaurant business. And so I had a relative that was in construction and he needed help. So I literally got married, came back, and I started carpentry. So I started rough carpentry, and was doing houses, drywall, that kind of stuff. And then got interested in woodworking. We were installing cabinets, and I kind of got that way. And I started focusing more and more on that. And then eventually a job came up in a local franchise called Kitchen Tune-Up, and I took a job with them. And they had a process a lot like what I do right now, but mine's a hell of a lot better because I am.
Of course.
And I developed my own kind of ways of doing things and just kind of started my own business, and that kind of led to today, right? So
wow, that's crazy. That's quite the journey.
Well, it is what it is. It's a long time. I'm old, so a lot of shit happens in years, But you had asked about the colors and all that kind of stuff and the water-based journey, and that kind of came out of that whole kitchen tune-up thing. So when I was working for them, when they had a process called a tune-up, where they could come into a house and in a day, if you had cabinets that needed to be freshened up, but you wanted them to look like they always had been, which was really popular back then, they had some Balin and Mohawk products, basically the furniture stuff that we were trained in, and for like fixing spots where stain was missing and stuff like that. And they had a product called Finish Up, that when you're done, you'd put it in a little bowl, and it was just a really really thin liquid, and you'd literally take like a little cotton cloth and you'd wipe it down the door, and by the time you got to the bottom, the top was already dry, but that was adding a little clear coat on the top to lock in all the aerosols and powders and stuff that you used to do your repair, and that was it. And that was all they did. And for me, I was always like, well, that's a good concept, but you could do this a lot better. There's a better way to do it. So when I got out on my own, I started using, like some of the old masters, oil-based stains and lacquers and stuff like that to try to replicate that system with something better. But what I ran into was, I'm in Minnesota, and you try to spray a lacquer in somebody's house, in January and February when it's 30 below, and that doesn't work very good. So then I was like, I got to figure this out in water-based. And back then, this is like, 1998, 1999, there was literally no information on water-based, and what was out there was really shitty.
Mm-hmm.
It was just bad, right?
Yeah.
So I spent literally 2 or 3 years trying every different water-based product that I could find. There was stuff like Fear, which isn't in that's not in business anymore. There's a company called Van Technologies in Minnesota that is still going. They're operating under Greenlight Coatings right now, I think. There was Target Coatings, which they're still going yet. Target is
Yeah,
he's still
he's still
operating
around.
out there. Yep, he's still got his stuff. But those were kind of some of the ones that were really early in the process. And then General Finishes too. At that point, they were coming into the market too, so they were on. But it was really, there wasn't much going on. And then about a couple of years into it, I ran into ICA. There was somebody that I knew that had ICA stuff and recommended that, and I got the CNA kit. And then that's what really kind of like my mind went boom when I saw that, because it was the pigments were so different. Everything was so different.
Yeah.
If you look at it, like what we just did this weekend with the Envirolac stains, that was basically kind of the same stuff that I got into back in like 98, 99. And it's kind of like everybody's, or in the industry in the United States, that's kind of new technology, so to speak, but it's been around for a while. But they really are game changing stains, And with this new system that Envirolac has, and I'm not getting paid for them, but I'm just going to tell you, I'm not a part of them or anything, but they have a good system. And I'll talk about different companies because that's what it is. But what Stefan has done over the last couple of years, he started talking to me about this like a couple of years ago, and he said, I want to put together a better stain program, but I want it to be comprehensive. And that's what I was saying, like with ICA, their stain system, the CNA that they had was way ahead of its time. It was phenomenal. The problem with ICA was they had their North American distribution in Toronto, and their distribution throughout the United States was awful. You couldn't get anything. You talk to one of the guys there, and they're like, well, yeah, there's this vehicle that you can put in, or this vehicle, and I'm like, okay, where is it? How do I get it? I don't know. So, well, then it doesn't do any good. If you don't have this stuff, it doesn't do any good to say it's there. So that was, I think, their downfall. They would have been, I think they could have really dominated the North American market had they been more aggressive in getting their product to the United States and really working hard side by side with people to get the product on the shelf. But I think they focused more on bigger OEMs and whatnot. So like I said, that is what it is. But now we're talking about Envirolac, and Envirolac, the one thing I will say with Stefan is he's been very open, and he really welcomes feedback from anybody. So like if you've got suggestions, he's really listening, and he's always got his ear to the ground on things. So he understood that, availability was important. Having a complete system was important, and then understanding was very important. So he really redesigned his website. Now everything's interactive. So when we had people here in the class this week, they could actually go back into the shop, open up their phone to the website, and then we also had a brochure, a pamphlet. They could take their phone and scan a color from that pamphlet. It would open up on their phone, and they could get all the information on it. So whether you're going to spray it, wipe it, spray and wipe, whatever you're going to do, you could pick out the right base for it, and then it would pull the right formula for it, and you could print everything out. So we literally had them making their own stains based on that. So that was really important, and I think he's done a better job than anybody in the industry in doing that, which is cool. Very, very, very comprehensive, and for anybody that wants to do their own stains, it's very easy to get into. So that's where I think it was exciting, and we saw really good feedback, I think, from the people that were here this weekend, and we sold a lot of stain kits. I mean, literally, I think we were going to try to sell maybe 12, and I think we sold like 18. So I mean, it was
wow. He's using the micronized pigments, right?
Exactly. Yeah, he's got the pigments,
Yeah.
and he's also got dyes. But the one thing that I haven't seen from anybody else too is he's got harmonizing stains too. So he's got a harmonizing base where you can take like oak and think about you're doing a house and they got pine jams and an oak trim. If you take pine and oak next to each other and stain them, they generally don't really look too close. This harmonizing stain makes them all look very, very close.
Yeah, those harmonizing are like pigmented dye stains. I've seen those solvent based, not water based. I've seen them in solvent based, and they work really well.
Yeah, and then he's got a base to help fight the overlap too, which, as you know, with water-based stains is always an issue, the overlap, because usually you've got a resin in there, and once that resin sets in a water-based stain, if you go over it again, it doesn't redissolve it and wet back out. It just builds on top, so you get darker color. So with their uniforming stain base, you can actually take, like, we took a panel and I had 3 people stain it. It was 8 foot long by 2 foot wide, had one on each end and one in the middle, and they each did their thing, and they came in the middle and wiped it out, and it was perfect, and you could take like a maple panel and do like half of it, and then leave an inch gap and come back like 3 minutes later and do the other half. and then come back 3 minutes later and do the middle and do all of them, blend it back in, and it blends back in.
Wow.
So that's something that's been very difficult to do with water-based stains historically. So I think that was a good thing. But I think what we showed probably, or what I focused on more than anything in the class, was just that I think all in all, with water-based stains, really the perfect thing to do with them is to spray no wipe, because that is so much quicker and more efficient, and the color, the uniformity, and everything is really better. So if you can set yourself up to spray the stains and not touch them, you'll have increased production. You're going to have more consistent look. You'll have better performance, and I think everything just is easier. So like we were doing, I had a friend of mine, Danny, had his little, he invented a thing for spraying doors where he's got where your hinge cup holes are, or you can put a little thing that he has in there and you lock them into the hinge cup holes, and then you got 2 metal poles, and then he's got a rotisserie thing. You put them on there and you can literally spray the one side and then flip it and spray the other side without touching it, and then grab those and take it off of there, and you're never touching the doors. So in this class, we were able to do both sides of a door. And we're doing, like, when we sprayed the stain on, we're spraying both sides, 2 passes, one this way and one that way, on both sides in like 20 seconds.
I saw that thing. I saw your videos, and I was like, what kind of weird contraption does Denny got there? I was like, man, that was crazy.
Yeah, so that was Danny's, and anybody that's wondering about that, I can give them a link to it from X-Axis, and it was an invention where it's kind of a low production thing right now, so the cost was a little bit high to get to market. So it's not the cheapest kit, but when we're doing it, I mean, if you look at it, what you would spend to get that kit, you'd make up for probably in 6 months if you're going to be doing like spraying that kind of stuff, because you can do both sides of the door and you're not touching it. And then you stack it horizontally instead of vertically. Some people will spray vertically, but if you sprayed a stain that if you get even a little heavy with a stain when you're spraying it vertically, it'll run and curtain, and then it doesn't look right. And you always got to control things. With this thing that he's got, you can literally spray it flat on both sides and then hang it flat and get it done and not touch it. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. So I was interested, because I was like, man, it's like he's spraying horizontal both sides, but I was wondering how you were stacking that. So it's like it has like holes in a pole, and you just stick it in, so it's drying flat.
Yeah, and so that was the thing that he came up with, because every door is a different size. The spacing between the hinge holes, he's got a thing now, and he didn't make it himself because he wanted to leave it flexible. But he's got plans where you can make your own. You just basically put slots, and you can make it 2-sided. So you put slots in 2 sides, and then a piece in the middle that's just staggered enough that when you put that 1/4-inch flat stock in there, it catches a lip in the middle, and then it just sits flat. And then whether you got a wider door or a shallower doors, you can put it in the same slot.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but like I said, it was a pretty good system, and for people to see that, because we're coming in there, and John Knotts brought his Segola guns, so we were using Segola guns, and those are unbelievable. They came in and he hadn't even seen them yet. We pulled them right out of the box and we were spraying. And if you look at the videos we had, I mean, the fan pattern on those things was perfect, and the price point was really good. So we had the Segola guns, and we we're spraying the doors with them, both with the stain and the clear coat. And then going from that right into onto his rack with the green fast cure. So we had a really fast cycle time. And I think people that saw that understood that, if you've got water-based coatings, the biggest things are like I said, with stains, the biggest thing in my mind, the biggest time suck is the brushing on and wiping off, and then getting it look uniform.
Yeah.
Spraying takes care of that, because you can spray quickly and evenly, and as long as you can apply it consistently, you're going to get a good look. And then from there, using that system, then going right to the green fast cure, you can put stuff in front of there and dry it really quick, so you can really drop your production time. And you can invest, I think, a pretty modest amount of money into it and get good production. We put that green fast cure in, and I think it was like 3 years ago we did that green fast cure. And the one unit we had, I think at the time it was like $12,000 for a 2-head unit. And we had that paid for easy in 6 months. I mean, just in the productivity, you're going from 2.5 hours of drying a rack, usually at air temperature, to like half an hour.
Yeah. Talk to Eric about that. He loves it. Eric can't talk highly enough about Green Fast. We've been up there a couple times. I've been up to see his place. He's got a nice facility.
Yeah. Eric's got the conveyor system on there. So his is actually better yet. Yeah. Yeah. He's got a super nice system.
That thing is just kicking him out. That's crazy.
It is. Yeah, and with the volume he's doing right now, he needs it. So.
Oh man, he is staying so busy. It's nuts. So, like, we've been around a while. What do you think with the switch to water-based? Because we know it has a lot to do with, being in people's houses, but in your opinion, switching to the water-based coatings, what do you think's been the driving factor behind that, behind getting people switched over? I mean, when I first started, my father-in-law, he'd been painting since 83. And still to this day, we talk about coatings and he's telling me about water-based wood coatings, and he just looks at me and says, "You're full of shit. They don't work like that." He just can't fathom the industry and how it's changed. Like, what would you attribute that to?
Well, I think there has been a big push, and I think a lot of it has been that, the guys working in their house and the cabinet painting stuff and that sort of stuff has definitely accelerated it for sure. I think that's been a driving force. But then you've also got to look at regulations. And then I think flatline finishing systems now are getting more adapted to the water-based stuff because now they can put them through there and they can do the drying. The biggest factor that has always been a weakness with water-based has been A, grain raise, and then B, it's been dry time, right? Dry time is not advantageous versus solvent when you're talking about that kind of stuff. So, what people have to look at is what the total system is to do it and how to do it effectively. So if you can control the temperature of the product going in other words, keep the coating the same temperature going in, and then use some sort of way of drying it faster to get the water out of it, that can really give you an advantage in that, and then you don't have to be smelling the air, right? I mean, I started out spraying solvent, in my cabinet shop, and we had a booth, but you'd spray a kitchen full of cabinets, and that whole room smelled like lacquer in there, and it was terrible. You walk in there and you're getting high at the end of the day. I don't know if you're happy or whether you had a headache or whatever it is, but I mean, it's honest.
No, it didn't really matter at that point.
And then the other thing is when you are spraying those solvent-based stuff, most of them have formaldehyde, and that'll off gas for up to a year in a client's house. So you got to think about your clients. Are you willing to expose them to formaldehyde and their children and their pets, over the next year because you want to use solvent-based products in your shop to save a little time drying or not, That's the way I feel. I mean, I've always had a little environmental part to me anyways. And so for me, if I can give the customers a healthy option that is going to be less harmful on their health down the road, I'm going to do it, and early on, like I said, the stains were really horrible. And then I found the CNA that took care of that. The other thing was that the build was pretty bad on the early ones. So I was doing sometimes 3 and 4 coats where I could get by with 2 coats with solvent base. They've taken care of that now by getting the higher viscosity and higher solids counts. So that's really helped in that manner. But really, the thing that got me, I think the most probably was in 2009, I'd been using ML Campbell, Aqualente and some stuff like that. And we had gotten in, and actually even earlier than that, we had gotten into a lot of the custom coatings that they wanted at the time, or the custom finishes. So they wanted glazing and distressing and all that kind of stuff that was going on. So we're using like ML Campbell products. We're using like Amazing Glaze and Resistant and Claw Lock. And we're doing some of the spot crackle and all that kind of stuff. Well, then I wanted to do it in water-based and stuff to be able to do the same thing. I wanted to be able to do the same thing whether I was doing a custom kitchen for a $2 million house or if I was doing, I had some of these cabinets that were 20 years old and they wanted to make it look better and they wanted that same system. So I was like, how can I accomplish that? And then I got talking to Bill Leitner, who was the lead chemist at General Finishes at the time, and he had this tinting station that they had offered. And so with the tinting station, you had all the pigments for the paint, and then you had all the pigments for the stains, and then they had their dyes. And then we bought one of them. So we had this whole tinting station. So we had all this stuff to make everything. And then all I had to do was buy the bases. And for me too, that was more economical because I could buy bases 5 gallons at a time and then mix paint however I needed. If I needed 1, 2, or 3 gallons, I could mix whatever I needed, and I could actually short myself a little bit. And then if I needed that extra half gallon, I could just make it rather than making 3 and then having 1 left over or half left over. So it helped with the flow of the product. But the other thing that I thought was cool was, when you're thinking about ML Campbell or you're looking at any of the other companies that were solvent, if you wanted to do a lot of these custom stuff, if you had their wood song stain or if you had their amazing stain or you had their microtone stains, those weren't necessarily, you could put them into their top coats a little bit, but you're still talking about introducing oil into a solvent. You're talking about introducing lacquer or acetone or whatever it was into there. So they weren't necessarily always that compatible. And even between layers, they weren't always necessarily that compatible. So with this general finishes system, it was like I could take a clear base and I could take a glaze base and I could take a stain base and I could take the same pigments and put them in every one of those, and they would all look exactly the same, and they're all compatible. So now we have compatibility in stain. We got compatibility in base. We got compatibility in toners. We got compatibility in everything. And that's where the water-based stuff shines. And that's what people need to understand. Right now, like with this Envirolax system that he's got, we can make powder glaze, we can make stains, we can make glazes, we can make toners, we can make anything, and they all mix together and they're all compatible with each other. And that's where the advantage water-based has that you're never going to get in a solvent line.
I mean, I never thought about it, but that's very true. Yeah, I mean, the compatibility cross segment on the water-based side is huge.
You can literally do anything. So the people right now that are doing cabinet refinishing that are only thinking about painting, for the last 3 years, I've been trying to get them to shift their mind to understand that painting trends will fade and stains will emerge again. And so there's going to be people that are going to have cabinets that are stained that either want them, once again, to look better again or to look different again. And how are you going to achieve that? Because you're not putting a pigmented product over top of that. And how are you going to approach it? So now you can do repairs. And actually, we're going to start one this afternoon that we're going to do that very thing. They want their cabinets to look better, but they like the look of them. So we're going to take the cabinets and bring them back again and make them look good. And they're going to give them, I'll give them another 20 years of service life out of that. And it's going to be at a very modest price.
Yeah. So, that makes a lot of sense.
So, and then you get customers where they want to change it a little bit. We can mix up a toner and use that, and we can use it on site. We can do whatever we want to, so everything works together. And I think that is what people need to understand. And that's what the industry needs to start telling people and showing people what's possible. Because like with that class, I started talking about all the different things you can do. Like you can take a water base, and I've done this on a lot of my classes, like with the CNA stuff, they have like yellows and greens and whatever. So I'd take like a yellow CNA and I'd take a green CNA and I would take a door that was cherry and I'd mask it off in half and I'd do half of it. I'd spray it with a yellow. So it turned it really yellow. The other one I'd do green, and then we'd come back with a brown stain and we'd spray that over both of them. And you can see how you can change that undertone to even out the color. And then when you put the stain on the top, that color will come through a little bit. So if you want to kill red, you can put green on top of it, or you can do whatever. And you can actually come up with a formulation that nobody's going to be able to duplicate, because you start with changing the base layer color and then adding over top of it. So there's, like I said, it's just the things you could just sit there all day and think of different ways you can do this stuff, and it's all compatible. So that's what I like about it. It just gives you a lot of flexibility and freedom.
So for reference, for some guys in here that not quite as technical, break down when you say CNA, so they understand.
The ICA CNA stain line, that was a kit of micronized stains that they came up with, and there was 16 bases that you would buy. And with that 16 bases, they had 3-fold color brochures that had like 212 color formulations that you could make based on those 16 bases, and you never had to mix more than 3 of them to get any color. And so with that 212 colors, what they have is they would have rows and they'd have columns. The rows would have 3 different colors, and all those were different concentrations of the same recipe. So in other words, you would mix up a color, and if you had 3%, 3% colorant and then 97% base, it would look one way. And then if you went up to 5 or 10% of colorant and then 90% base, and you went to 10 or 15% colorant, they would all look different, because you get more saturation of color as you went across. And then the columns going vertically were all a different recipe. So that's what really helped me. And I'm a guy, so colors for me were like, I have no freaking idea what colors and how to do it, right? But when I used this CNA thing, it started to tell me, and I got to see visually what happens when you have more yellow in something, or more green in something, or more red or blue in something. And so from there, I understood. And so now I've got this thing that I show people. It's like, I'll take the red base, the yellow base, and the blue base. And if you mix even parts of them, and if they got the same concentration, you'll get what I call perfect brown. So that's just a brown of, all the stain colors are basically based off of red, yellow, and blue, right? And so if you put even amounts of them in there, you'll get what I call a perfect neutral brown. Every stain formula that's out there is based off of that. But it has either more or less of red, yellow, or blue. So then what I do is I'll mix some red I'll pour it into 3 different containers, and then I'll put yellow in one, I'll put blue in one, I'll put red in one, and show how that color shifts then. And that's really all stain matching is all about. And from there, And then from there, it's also about the concentration. So adding more or less base will get it more concentrated or less concentrated. Will make it darker, lighter. But that's really all it is. I mean, 101 stain matching, that's what it is. It's everything is kind of based off of brown. Of course, obviously now they got the grays, so you're throwing in blacks and whites, but
Yeah, they're messing it up.
keeping it simple, it's basically with red, blue, and yellow, you can make any stain color you want to.
Yeah, I remember learning stain matching when I first started getting into, when I had my business, and I went your route. Same thing. I brought in the color system and started making my own colors. And I think if I remember right, man, it's been a long time, but when I did that and started mixing my own paint, if I needed 500 grams, I made 500 grams, spray one door. But I think I ended up saving, I think my first year of just colorants and bases, I ended up saving like 80 grand in material.
Oh, Zach, yeah, it's huge. And that's what we
It's
said too.
insane.
That CNA kit, I think when I bought that, the first year that I bought that, in like, I don't know what it was, 99, 2000, something like that. Put it this way, when I started using that, 90% of what we did was golden oak. And if I used the CNA 1006, it was the perfect golden oak. So, I mean, I was doing golden oak stain in water base way back then. So, so it's been a long time. But what I found too was, like you said, you pay $800 or $1,000 for this kit, but your cost per gallon is like maybe $5 to $10. It's so little because there's such a small amount of pigments because they're so concentrated. And then you're not buying a whole gallon every time. If you only need a quart, you can make a quart. And with those things, as long as you can weigh it, you can make a quart and you can make 10 gallons and they will look exactly the same as long as you weigh it out the same. It's going to look the same.
I preach that a lot to finishing guys when they talk about going from, you're talking about with the water-based, everything in the European or the American, it's, 20% hardener by weight, 15% hardener by weight. And they're like, I don't do weight. And I'm like, go buy yourself a gram scale and convert to weight. It will change your life on waste. And it doesn't matter if you're a pint, a quart, half gallon, 5 gallons, it doesn't matter. It's going to be the exact same every time, which is far more consistent than any paint store will give you.
It is absolutely, yeah, and that's a huge point too. Is the consistency of that, and like during COVID, we're running into supply chain issues just like everybody, right? Everybody had supply chain issues with COVID, and it was getting unpredictable, and we were busy. And so I was like, there was enough times where I ran into, and it wasn't the supplier's fault that, you started a job in 10 sheen, and all of a sudden you needed a gallon, you call them, and all of a sudden all they got is 20 sheen. Well, now all of a sudden you got to order enough to respray the whole kitchen in 20 sheen to make sure everything matched. So it was an added cost. So I called Stefan that one time when I was talking to him from Envirolac, and I was like, I think I want to do this myself again. I did it with General Finishes. It was easy. I want to do it again. So he set me up, and we basically at that time, what we ended up doing was I was like, I want to have enough product. I want to have the stuff. So what I did with Stefan is I ordered a whole pallet of products. So I ordered a pallet of, clears, sealers, 170, 200, whatever. I ordered a bunch of everything. And then with that, he sent me all the 896 pigments. And then he's got a OneDrive folder. So basically, whenever we needed a stain, and I standardized my stain, so I got like 12 paint colors that I use 90% of the time. We tell customers these are our colors. If you can use these, fine. If you can't, then we go outside and we'll mix it however we want to. But for 90% of the time, we can use these 12 colors and get by with it because that's what most people want. And so then from that point, we started mixing them ourselves. And like before that, we'd have like within 6 months, we'd have 70 partial gallons of stain or paint on the wall or on the rack that are taking up space because we bought them for a job, and you're always ordering extra to make sure you don't run out. And all of a sudden you got all these colors and you can't get back to them. So we started mixing them ourselves, and our costs went down because we could buy in bigger quantities. And then mixing them ourselves, we didn't have as much waste left over. We only mixed what we needed,
Yeah. I remember at one point I had, man, I think, before we switched to tinting, we had CVs and precats and some water-based stuff. We were having it all tinted, and I palletized all the half tints and half gallons and that we didn't need. And it was 5 pallets that were, 4 foot high. And I was like, $20 on Amazon or on Facebook, Mark, $20 a pallet. It stacks up so dang fast. And then when you switch over to making your own colors, it's like why the hell haven't I been doing this for 20 years? This is like the most amazing thing in the world, whether it's stain or pigmented. It's a game changer when you're a finishing shop and when you go to making your own colors. It's time to get there, but the systems that people offer in the training is amazing. But because once you get there, you'll never go back.
Right. That's what I feel too. You know, and like with the 896s, for instance, to buy those, you know, some of them are really expensive and you don't use them that much. Then
Yeah,
some
the
of them,
quinine violet is ridiculous.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm actually working with Stefan from Envirolac right now, and we're going to come up with a kit that I'm going to do. And he doesn't want to mess with it, so I'm going to handle this. And we're gonna come up with a kit size that'll be like under $1,000 to be set up with the pigments to get started. So if I got to take, you know, one of the, you know, some of the expensive ones that are almost $300 for a quart or whatever, and I got to break it up into 5, you know, and you're not going to use it anyways, break it up into 5 and repackage it and sell it. We're going to do that. And he's got the database of like 1,800 colors on a OneDrive file that you can do. So I'm going to do the same thing, because talking to people at the class this week, they're all like, you know, I'm just saying, you can make your own stain now. Why don't you make your own paint? And so I walked them through it, and they're like, well, heck, I would do that. You know, if I'm having paint shipped in from, you know, if you got a local source, it probably maybe doesn't make much sense. If you can just go across town or whatever and get something, it probably doesn't make sense. But we got a lot of people in the country that are like getting stuff shipped from hundreds of miles, or sometimes almost like across the country.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people or paint stores, distributors that still haven't bought in to the technology. And so you have a lot of people that just can't have access to it without shipping it, without ordering it. And I've never had to order paint on mine, and I think I would probably pull my hair out if I had to.
It does, you know, and we've got really good distributors not too far, like an hour away from us, like Hirschfield's. We lean on them a lot, and they're awesome people. Love the heck out of those guys, and so they do a good job. But like I said, even so, there's days where you need something. If I got to drive an hour up there and an hour back, that kills half a day. So mixing it yourself just, you know, tends to make sense. You know, there's going to be times, and the way I do the policy is this: it's like, you know, we've got our stains, and this is, I think, an important thing to talk about too. Is when I make like alabaster, for instance, you know, you know how it is. You grab 7 different Fandex from Sherwin-Williams, and you're going to have 7 different colors of alabaster, right? So what I tell people is, this is our version of alabaster. So if you're going to get it from us, this is what you're going to get. If you've got a paint chip from something that you want specifically matched to that, then we have to send it in, and we'll get it sent in and matched. And anybody that does this thing I'm talking about would handle it the same way. And it actually makes it easier, because it's a financial thing for them. They got to make a business decision on their end. Do I want to pay an extra $200 for a tinting fee and do a sign off on it to get this color? Or am I going to be okay with what he's got? Because at that point, then it's not like you doing it for free and getting it for free and going through the work. They're actually going to pay you then what a fair price is to get the exact color that they want. And so monetizing it is a good deal. And then from there, you're going to get most of the people doing your colors. If not, as long as you explain it to them and you educate them, and they understand then how the color system works, and that what you saw in somebody's house or what's in your house might not be the same as what's here. Let them be educated and let them direct you as to what extent they want to go to get the color that they're looking for.
Exactly.
And then a price to get to that point, then it's fair for everybody, right?
Yeah, that's what I used to do, is talk about light reflection. But then they would bring me a swatch, and I would match it, and they would lay it on top, and they'd be like, here's mine and here's yours. It doesn't quite look the same. And my comment was always like, okay, so you have cabinets already painted this color, and I'm going right up next to them. And they'd be like, no. And I'd be like, okay, so here's yours and here's mine. Which one's different? What's the difference? And they'd be like, well, there's no difference. I'm like, okay, then what? We're done. My color's going to work perfect.
Exactly. You know, and we do a lot of the stuff like with the Nix scanner too. When we got people coming in and want a paint color match, I said the other thing I can do is I can scan it with my Nix scanner, and I can pick the closest color to what this is in a Sherwin-Williams color. And then if you're okay with that, we can make that color. And a lot of people will be perfectly acceptable to that too. You just got to see, you know, what grade of expectation they have. And if they're reasonable, most of the people will take the easy route.
Yeah. I've used a lot of those color sensors in my days. PPG has one. Benmore has one. I don't think the Nix can be beat.
Yeah. I used the Sherwin-Williams one at first, and that one was bad. The Sherwin-Williams one, that was just totally unreliable. And we had some bad experiences with that. We got the Nix one. That one's been pretty good, you know?
Yeah, I love the Nix one.
Yeah, they're never going to be perfect, but it helps out a lot.
Yeah, there's a Bix coming out with a new one, BYK. And I was talking to Chris with it. It's a full spectrophotometer, and it's like $3,000, but it's portable. Like it has a battery, and it can hold 5,000 colors in it, or it can give you a digital readout. And then you take it back to your computer, you stick it in the base, and it'll give you the exact color, or it'll give you what the closest match is. So it's like a paint store spectro that has a battery that you can take to the job site, or if you're going somewhere for a designer and getting a good match. I mean, it's really sharp. I mean, it's a genius concept, but they're using the same light sensors and the same glass that all your high-end spectros are using that you see in every paint store out there. So I think it's going to be a good upgrade for a lot of people.
That's where technology is. That's where technology is kind of being your friend, right?
Yes, exactly. So question, what do you, we talk about, we've talked about stain, we've talked about paint, specialty coatings. Where do you see the trends going? Like, I mean, what have you noticed on your end as far as how things are pushing? Are they pushing back towards stain or more specialty?
Yeah, I mean, stains are becoming more popular, and different colors of paint are obviously gonna be going forward. People are gonna start doing other different shades of color or whatever. But I got a feeling. I keep saying it though. I mean, you keep saying I think stains coming in, and then you'll see a little bit, and then it just goes right back to paint. So I know it's so darn unpredictable. Really, what it comes down to is when's the next Joanna Gaines going to show up that changes the market, right? Because I mean,
exactly. I'm dying for stains to come back.
Yeah, it always comes to whatever's going to be that market disruptor, right? That's like the painters that I talk to. It's like everybody right now has got the exterior season is so big, and there's so much stuff for people, for painters and stuff like that. And I just think back to like when I started in the industry, everything was like aluminum siding, and it was vinyl siding, it was steel siding. There was literally nobody painting exteriors, and then interiors for new houses, it was all white. It was just one color. They'd come in with their white color, the ceilings, the walls, everything got done white for, I don't know, the first 5 or 6 years, I think, that I was working there. So, I mean, as a painter, there wasn't really a whole lot of specialty going on, right? They weren't painting the outside unless the house was from like the early 1900s or something like that. Otherwise, there might be a rare one, but there was no residential painting hardly going on outside. There was commercial painting. And then the interiors were very, very simple and basic. And then I remember the first house I went into, and all of a sudden the painter come up to me and goes, "This woman's crazy. She wants this room to be pink. She wants that one to be orange. She wants that one to be green. How am I supposed to do this? I have to charge her more. She thinks I'm going to do it for the same price, but I can't do it for the same price." And that was the first experience. And then like over the next 6 months, we started seeing more and more of it. Now every house is like that,
Every house is so many colors.
They came out with hardy siding, and that's where, you talk about that market disruptor. Hardy siding came up, and that was a market disruptor because now all of a sudden there's an exterior painting industry. And now if you look at exterior painting, that's become a huge thing, right? So the question I have always got in the back of my mind is, when is a manufacturer going to come up with the next thing that they put out there that all of a sudden they're not going to need to be painted again, and all of a sudden, boom, we're going to run into that. So you've always got to keep stuff cognizant. You got to be fluid with your business. Never think it's going to be forever, and always keep your eye towards the future and what's coming,
Yeah, you always got to be able to pivot. And business, that's the key thing to success is business. I mean, that being able to pivot, because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, that kind of goes me into the next one that I was going to ask you. So, I mean, you've been in business for a long time. I mean, with work for people and for yourself. Like, what, for the listeners out there, what is what I'll call a pivotal moment in your career that really pushed you to grow? Like, what was that moment where you're like, it's either shit or get off the pot right now?
Getting old.
I mean, just about as simple as you can put it right there.
I ain't as good as I once was, but or whatever, however you want to do it.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, but honestly, yeah, but honestly, I mean, that is kind of the case, right? I mean, I think up until about probably 3 years ago, thankfully, and I think I was blessed because I was into my mid 50s, and I could pretty much put in any schedule then that I could put in when I was 30. But if you talk to me now versus then, I might look at doing something, and then my body just says, "Fuck no." I mean, it just, I just can't do it. I don't have the energy, and it ain't going to get better as I go. I'm not going to find a fountain of youth, and I'm not going to suddenly have a resurgence in my energy level. So really, and that was part of the deal, right? I mean, even when we got into these Facebook groups, when I was early on, I had a couple people that helped me learn some stuff and get going, and they were very generous with their time. But still, at that point in time, it was still kind of an industry thing that you had to pay your price and you had to put your time in, and people weren't too sharing. And so I was looking at things, and I was like, I am getting kind of old now, and you never know. I mean, I could be here today. I could be gone tomorrow. I could not wake up tomorrow. I'm at that age where anybody could, or you get cancer, Lord knows what. And so I was like, well, I always I took the finishing part of what I did kind of like a college class. I got a strong science background and whatnot. So I kind of made it like a college thing, and I dove into it like a college course, and I educated myself on the industry, on the water-based side. And so I said, well, I could either be a stubborn, and grumpy old guy and just tell everybody, screw you, learn it on your own, or I could take what I knew and pass it on, and especially the people that I know will do the same thing. I pay it forward to a lot of people that I know and recognize will do the same thing for me. And so that's what I'm always looking for, is like who's the kind of person that if I give them some knowledge, they'll when somebody else comes up to them in a couple of years, they're going to do the same thing to that. So I focus most of my energy on people like that, and I try to help them and learn stuff because I know they're going to do that, and you can kind of see it. The whole industry has kind of changed now, or at least in the small world that we're in. I think it's been changed. I've been very adamant in people behaving and playing nice in the sandbox. And not getting into these pitching contests that happen too many times in industry. So I'm pretty loud and vocal about nobody's going to be pissing in the sandbox or whatever. And then the other thing is, try to make sure that you help everybody and help people. And instead of having people come in, if a new person comes in and they ask a dumb question, it's not really a dumb question. They just don't know it yet. So if you know the answer, help them. And if you're not going to help them, then just shut up, and don't say anything. And so I think yeah, and I see a lot more of that too. Like I had my mods here. We had what I called Mod Fest this week because we had like 6 of the mods from our groups came over here, and we all got to kind of get together and stuff. And I see that in every one of them, that they're so willing and eager to help everybody else. And so that makes me feel good to see that there's another generation doing that. And so hopefully, within the painting industry, and you see that even with, I mean, you look at Nick Slavic, Nick, and Jason Paris and a lot of those guys, Nick's running all over the country, and he could stay home on his beautiful farm place in his woods where I would be. He could spend his time, but he's running all over the place, and he's helping people to make their businesses better. You can't count the number of people whose lives he has literally changed because of how he is willing to share what he's learned. And I mean, you can't put a price tag on that, right? So I've always said, like, as an industry, we can work together, and I mean, yeah, there's competition, but in the end, it's a big enough world that you can help people that are not in your marketplace or whatever, and it's a big enough thing that there's no government program that's going to make people better, and there's really no tech schools or anything. So if you're looking at it and saying, boy, this sucks because I just went to this place and I got a bad experience because the employee wasn't trained well or this wasn't done well. Well, this is your chance. Do it in your industry. Make sure that your people are better so that people that are calling people in your trades aren't getting the same thing from you, right?
Yep. Changing the mindset of the trade business, of especially the coatings and the paintings business, to me is super important. I mean, painters have a stigma about them, and I mean, there's a lot of younger people getting into the business, and I think we need more younger people coming into this business. But they need to know that it's not just, painting walls and getting drunk afterwards. I mean, it can be a business and a thriving, successful business. And Nick has just changed the game for these guys that painters that want to scale their business. And I mean, I can't even think of the amount of people that he's probably helped, just getting people to think on the business mindset. That's been amazing.
It has been, and then, I overlap into the cabinetry business. So then you look at like my friend Jeff Bellows, he's been doing the same thing in his shop. He's opened his shop up to have training classes. And you've got Nick Frost, who works with Mosaic, but he runs around the country, just helping shops that are doing cabinetry to improve their he sells tooling. So of course he wants to sell his tooling, but I mean, he's helping people with their processes and figuring out how to make their machinery work better and do more things internally. And so, I mean, it's just to see people like that in the industry that are doing that sort of stuff it's good.
That is awesome. So like on that part, we kind of talk about people coming into it. Like for people, we kind of get into that for people that are just getting into the cabinet finishing or the painting industry alone. Like, in your opinion, what are some key essential tips, or what are some things that they need to develop, and some tips that you would have for someone that wants to jump in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, especially like with the water-based stuff, what I see, the people that are successful are the ones that understand that it's not easy. You're not the hardest part about this industry, especially with the small businesses that aren't factories, is that there's so many variations in temperature and conditions and whatnot. And you know what the groups are all full of, right? The groups are all full of, like, I'm having this problem with this, I'm getting bubbles here, I'm getting this there, why is this happening? And we get messages about that every day. And I think it's just the education of knowing that if you're not in a controlled environment, you have to understand if you're going to be really successful and be able to adapt over time, you have to understand that you're not working in a controlled environment, and everything in the environment has an impact on what you're trying to do. So like if it's cold out, or if it's windy out, or if it's humid, or if it's dry, every one of those takes an adjustment. And it isn't just water-based, solvent-based stuff. You have to do it too, right? I mean, it's actually worse. I think solvent-based is worse. I mean, you get humidity, you get blushing, you get too dry, it dries too fast, you got to put retarders. So I mean, there's no thing like that. But my thing is, and I'm like, even this week, I'm kind of thinking more and more along this line of, I think what people need to look at is we invest in a lot of different things. I think the most important, like if you're going to do a kitchen a week or more, I think probably the best thing you could do to make your system more foolproof and to have less problems is regulation of product temperature from beginning to end. So I touched on it in my class a little bit this weekend, and the material heaters that they have, like the Kremlin Magma and those kind of things, incorporating one of them into your system so that you can have, if your paint is 50 degrees and it's 70 degrees in here, and you're not going to get good results, you're not going to get consistent results, but you can invest into one of those material heaters, and every time you send product through your machine, it's going to come out the exact same temperature. And you tell me, I mean, you've been in the coatings business, and you've been in it more than I have because you've been involved directly with the manufacturer. If you had a customer that could control the temperature of their product application on every single thing, how much do you say that would change the world for somebody?
I mean, your consistency and your repeatability it would have to at least go up by 40%. I mean, maybe 50%. I mean, if you take out the other variables that come in water-based with, dew point, humidity, all that good stuff. But I mean, I agree. I mean, being able to control the temperature of your product is huge. I mean, but it's not something, it's like what I tell people is solvent, temperature matters a little bit in the coating, but solvent's been around for so long. There's always an additive that can fix what you're doing. With water-based, there's a lot of additives. But to a certain extent, Mother Nature is the ultimate equalizer.
Yes.
And you can add only so much stuff. And if it's, your dew point is within 1 degree of the temperature outside and the humidity level is 80%, like, you just can't spray. Like, you just have to understand temperature, humidity, dew point, those all affect. Mother Nature is going to be the ultimate equalizer in water-based coatings. And there's just no way around it.
That's absolutely huge. Yeah, because with a solvent product, it's just releasing solvent and there's none in the air. So that's your only variable. When you got water-based, you got water in the air and in the product. So they're always going to be interacting with each other differently.
And if the substrate's going to absorb the water, or if it's new wood or refin, I mean, it's just so many different variables. But, I've used those product heaters before, not a ton, but, now that you say that, I mean, something like that, somebody coming out with something, if you could get Tritech or Graco or Titan or any of those guys for the refinishers to come out with something that would regulate product control and was moderately inexpensive, then I mean, that would be a huge game changer. I've been trying to get Tritech on here, get Don on here, so I'm gonna have to beat him up on that one.
So I'm working on a little thing myself that'll help with that too. So, the biggest thing that we've run into over the last couple of years is just the amount of pumps that we've been running, because you'll run clear coat and you got clear coat, you've got whites, you got dark colors, you got light colors. And if you get multiple jobs in with multiple colors, we just ended up setting up another pump. Well, pretty soon we got like 6 pumps out there. Well, then you got 6 pumps, you got 6 hoses, you got 6 filters, you got 6 guns, you got 6 tips. And so for us, really, honestly, it got almost too much to try to manage all that different stuff, and it was becoming counterproductive. And then hoppers are awesome, for the product flow, but hoppers suck for cleaning paint out of them. And if you don't keep them clean, then you get flaking and all kinds of stuff, and then they become a negative. So I pared down all of the sprayers in my shop. Now I'm down to just a couple of them, and then I'm kind of working on a thing that I've got that we'll be able to do that, where you can pretty much just maybe run like one pump and switch stuff, and it'll be kind of fun.
I mean, you would think that somebody would have. I mean, if you've got flat lines that have manifolds on them, and they'll do up to like 5 or 6 colors out of 3 heads, like you would think something like that would be doable.
That's exactly what I've been kind of playing with. So, and that's what we're going to do, is we're going to just go down to one pump, and then be able to feed it in with colors and switch it over really easy.
That's a good idea. I have to get you back on after you get that thing going. I want to see how that's going. That'll be interesting. So I know we're getting there towards the end. I don't want to keep you too long, but we've talked about a bunch of paint. I always like to wrap things up outside of the paint world. What's Denny like? What does Denny like to do outside of the paint world? What's your hobby?
What's that grumpy old guy like? So I mean, for me, I got, obviously I've got my wife, I've got my dogs. I've got two Cocker Spaniels. They're field bred for hunting. So they're kind of like a lot of my life. My granddaughter that I've got, she's been a very large part of our life, which has been great. Spend all the time with her, which is awesome. And then other than that, I'm a pretty simple guy. Like literally, if I have a day off, which is rare, but whenever I do get a day off or I don't have something to do, I literally go back to, I'm like 30 miles away from the farm area that we grew up in. I've still got relatives that are farmers. So I'll go out there with a 4x4 or the side-by-side, or I'll, throw in the guns or something like that and do a little target practice, or, whatever it is. That's basically me. I spend all day and I love talking to people and being around people. But at the end of the day, when I shut down, I kind of like to be by myself. I'm not the kind of person that's going to get done at the end of the day and then run out to the bar and go club hopping or that kind of crap anymore or whatever. I pretty much am just I'm kind of private and just go home and relax. Or like I said, I might go out in the woods or, go on the grass and horse around. That's just me.
So what's your hunting? Like, you like deer, upland, duck? I mean, what?
Deer hunting and pheasant hunting are the 2 major ones that we do. Those are the...
Pheasant is my favorite. I did, I've done normal pheasant hunting with some buddies, and then I had a friend take me on a European pheasant hunt. Have you ever been on one of those?
Describe that to me.
So European pheasant hunt, so we did quail hunting during the day. It was like guided. They raised the pheasants there. So during the pheasant hunt, we go out to this huge ass field, and there's 4-story tower in the middle of this field. And they have pheasants in this cage, and they raise them there. They breed them, and they take them, hundreds of them up to this cage, and they just open and they just let them go. And you're in like 10 stations. There was 10 stations around this tower, probably about 100 yards out each direction. And they would sound off this buzzer and let him go. And it was just, everyone's shooting as many as you can. It was like moving clay targets. And at each station, there was a basket full of shotgun shells. Everyone used the same shell. They provided them. And there was dogs at every station. So if one got away, you and the dog would just go, and the guide, you'd go hunt it down, and then you'd switch to the next station, and they'd oh man, it was...
That's interesting. No, I haven't been exposed to that one.
Oh, it was just, it's not a lot of sport to it, but it was just a lot of fun.
Just a lot of fun, yep, and good target practice.
We went, and afterwards they had guys that cleaned all of our pheasant for us and had them in bags, and we were having dinner. There was probably 15 of us, 20 of us there. And it was my buddy's insurance company. And then the owner came out and he was like, 300 pheasants is what they released. He said, we killed 288. And then he was like, John's insurance company did 297. Everyone get your shit. We're going back out there to find the rest of those pheasants.
Nice.
It was a lot of fun. That was probably one of the most fun trips I've ever been on hunting wise, because it wasn't anything crazy, but
Where was that at then? What state was that in?
that was actually in Oklahoma when I did that. Yeah, we did that in Oklahoma. And I guess there's one's supposed to be a couple here in Texas. I haven't found them yet.
So I go see Kim and Jeremy in Oklahoma. I can line up that trip then.
Yeah. You come see Jeremy in Oklahoma. I'll call my insurance buddy. He's still there. He runs, and I've actually got him quite a bit of business he does commercial insurance, and it's in Stroud. His is in Stroud, and it's owned by a subsidiary of an insurance company, and that's all they do. They raise quail, they raise pheasant, and they have a ton of dogs. Huge shop that has bedrooms in it. You stay there, and they have a chef and everything. During the day, we went out with one guy and a guide and a dog, and you went quail hunting all morning for like 2-3 hours in the morning. They have like thousands of acres. We just go quail hunting. They would let them go, and you just go quail. Come back, have lunch. They had a skeet range, shoot some skeet. And then around 2-3 o'clock, we went to the tower and did that European pheasant hunt. And I was like, man, this is like the ultimate weekend. It was great. Highly recommended if you can find it.
In this area, it's pretty much just, find a field or a ditch or something like that and walk it. You bring the dogs and they pop it up and you shoot it or whatever. I've done some out in South Dakota. I've got a really good friend that has a ranch out in South Dakota, and that one's really nice because they've got tons of wild birds out there. And the way they have the fields, they got it set up for groups of people to come in. It's all private property, so we got a pretty high bird density, and you can go in there and do really well with birds too. If you want to get a lot of good numbers, you go to a place like that, and it's a whole nother world. Here you might walk a day and get a limit, or you may not. There you basically walk and you can get as many as you can shoot. Well, obviously they have a limit too, but it's much different world. It's like a lot of volume there. So
yeah, and that was like this because it's a ranch and they raise them for it.
Yeah, so then you can just do whatever you want to there. There's no limits or no. Yeah.
After dinner, you go outside and there's a bag and dry ice in there, and you've got like 3 or 4 pheasant, a couple quails, and you just grab your bag and go home. I'm like, all right. I call this bougie hunting. I don't care. I'm in. I don't have to clean the birds. Let's go.
Exactly.
I don't mind doing it, but man, this is a lot easier.
Are you going to be doing some more traveling now with your situation, or what do you got going on?
So now basically what I'm doing is the podcast is a big part of my deal. Just trying to grow the knowledge. I think this afternoon, one of the Ravago is a raw material manufacturer. One of their technical guys reached out and he wants to come on to kind of talk about some stuff they've got going on. So like my vision of the podcast is all aspects of finishing: raw materials, manufacturers, distributors, end users. Just giant conversations, looping people in, letting people tell their story. But beyond that, I'm doing some consulting for some, kind of like Nick, doing some consulting for guys that want to scale their sales, and then training. So I kind of do on the media side, offer training videos. I've got a couple guys that want me to generate some training videos for them, and then some on-site training. If people want to come out, want to hold a class, whether it be a distributor, I have a couple distributors that said, hey, will you come out and hold like a 2-day class? And
yeah, that's awesome, because that's exactly what the industry needs.
Exactly. And not being associated, because I don't have my finishing company anymore. I'm travel a lot. So my wife and I sold our house December. She works for a government contractor. So we're down in Waco right now doing like a 2-year stint. But instead of buying a house, we bought a 45-foot motorhome, like a Class A motorhome. And we live in it full time. Like, absolutely love it. We travel a lot. So the plan is, she does a lot of remote work too, to be able to travel. Like if I want to go up to the Dakotas and do a tour up there of different distributors that want to do training, I want to be able to set that up and go up there and just travel and enjoy life.
If you want to come up to Minnesota and walk on water in the winter or something like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure there's got to be weight limits on that stuff. I'm all about coming up to Minnesota. That's the one place I haven't been is like the Great Lakes, Minnesota, Wisconsin, that whole area.
It is a fair area. I mean, they all have such great things. I mean, northern Wisconsin. I lived there for 5 years. It was just so beautiful up there. That's where my wife is from. And then spending a lot of time in South Dakota too. South Dakota is so opposite of Wisconsin. You go from trees to prairie, but it's still so beautiful. I mean,
Montana, Wyoming. I want to get up that way. My wife, it's our 10-year anniversary this year, and it's her parents is 50. So we're taking them on an Alaskan cruise. So we go in the end of May. So we're excited about that. Yeah, my father-in-law is a big outdoor guy. He's never been to Alaska, so it'd be fun to take him to Alaska. He's been a lot of places, but Alaska's one that's always eluded him. But other than that, I mean, that's kind of what I'm planning on doing. Is just trying to help share the knowledge that I've got, help some guys grow, get some training, get basically a lot of training and a lot of helping the smaller guys. Your painters that are 1 and 2 man guys, and they really want to build something for their future. Based on my experience with having 8 to 10 guys when I had my company, what it takes to get there, and just help guys go that direction.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. The industry needs that kind of stuff. You're talking about something to ask coatings manufacturers that came up. You maybe know this. You know this. Product numbers. I'm just going to throw out product numbers, and I'll bring Renner. I don't use much Renner, but Renner's very popular. But I'm going to bring them up as probably the most serious, the most egregious one in this aspect is, product numbers and what the heck product number, what that means, right? They know what everything means by a product number, but when you get out in the groups and people are talking about it, there's like a fog over their eyes. They have no idea what that means, right? So, and there's only 2 ways to do it. You can either name this, you can name this like 1107, or you can name it like kick-ass white, or whatever. You're either going to have some kind of name for it, Aqualente or whatever, or you're going to have the product number. But honestly, what would really be valuable, ICA used to do it, but they don't have it anymore. Now, when you look at the Italian websites, it's all more about like playing to your emotions, and it's not anything technical. It's all like you go in there and they're trying to give you like a feel of some kind or another, and it really tells you absolutely freaking nothing about anything you want to know, right? But for me, like from the nerdy technical aspect, it would be like every one of their things they should have on there. And I brought this up many times. Like if you have a coating and it's got a number on it, what does that number mean? Because all these are developed for a different thing, right? I mean, the coatings are made differently because usually they've got an OEM that needs a special application. You might have one that sprays something vertically and they need to have a clear. They might spray it vertically and they need to have an amber look. They spray it flat and it needs to lay out nice on a flat line system. But it might not spray worth a crap on a vertical surface like Aqua, all things like that. So really having a key to their products that show what they were developed for, so people can understand what it is, could save a lot of time in people understanding what's the best one for their application. Does that make sense?
So sort of. So what you're saying is, instead of like, because you can go down to the nitty gritty and I can explain to you what a lot of product numbers is, like each number. But honestly, what that comes down to is an engineer / chemist, just over analyzing how to item product numbers and trying to make it as difficult for everyone as possible, because they're the only son of a bitch that can explain to you what it means.
More than just the numbers, but it's like each one of your products has an application that it's good for. And just so somebody can just easily see, it's like, for instance, if you've got something that's developed for vertical surfaces, just have on there this great, it has good vertical hang. Van Technologies used to do that too with their products. They'd tell you which ones had, were for vertical surfaces, flat surfaces. This one has amber color to, is oil modified or something like that. So it's better for like, oaks or something like that versus a crystal clear one that you'd want to put over top of maple or something like that. But just have
it's almost like a a usage flow chart.
Yeah, just like basic usages of it. Yeah. So when a customer comes in and they're looking at it, or like somebody's in the group and somebody says, "We'll use this coating." Well, okay, you just said to use it, but what the heck is it? That's really kind of like the biggest thing I
I
see.
gotcha.
Use this coating. Okay, but is it really designed for what I'm trying to do with what I'm doing in my business? Because there's
That's a good point.
if there's only one thing that was getting sprayed in the industry, you'd only need to have one paint. I mean, they have all these different products for different purposes. They develop them because, take factory A. They'll have an OEM that comes to them and they've got a particular thing that they do. And then the chemist will work with them in order to develop the perfect system, the perfect thing, whether it's the resins, additives, whatever it is, to get it to work in their scenario. Well, now that it works in their scenario, nobody else in the world knows what the heck that is. They don't understand. But then they introduce it and they say, well, now that we're doing it, we might as well make it available to everybody. But everybody doesn't know that it's really good for doing this. Maybe it isn't good for doing this. Maybe our other ones.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Some way to a focus on just spending some time to take your products and just let people know like what the best application is for that.
The best application and why it's used for that application. That's a good idea. Yeah. I'll recommend that to some guys and see about that's a really good idea. Because I used to get those calls all the time, and I still, on social media, hey, I'm spraying this. Should I use, when I was with Centurion or CIC, I'd get, hey, I'm spraying stair treads, verticals, and risers and skirting. Should I use the 400 or the 2800? Like, which one's going to be best? So, for durability and stuff like that, that's an excellent idea.
That would be the one thing that I see. Just being active on the groups and knowing the volume of questions that you answer, it just seems like there's an abundance of those that with a website, on your website, just having that, or in your literature, just having a simple, this is what they're for. I just go back to ICA. They used to have on their website, it was very good because they would have a very good formula for all their stuff. They'd have like this number and then what it was for. This is a transparent, high vertical hanger, whatever, for spraying vertical surfaces. The next one would be, amber color, good for this or whatever. And it was just very descriptive. So when you saw the coating, you could pick the one that was the best suited for what you're doing. And then from there, it's a much easier choice versus the people that just order this number and then all of a sudden, oh, it's too thin, so I got to add thickener. Oh, it's too thick, I got to add reducer. It's this, it's that. To get one that's closer to what you're doing right now, it takes less manipulation.
Yeah. So you can use it virgin, which is always going to be your best case scenario. That's a good one. Yeah. All right. I'll spread that word. That's definitely something that I think should be doable to some of these guys. Awesome. Well, man, Denny, this has been an awesome talk. I didn't mean to keep you for this long, but man, I appreciate you coming on.
I had a little free time, so we're good. So it was a good talk. I haven't ever talked to you before other than a few minutes here or there. So it's always good to talk to people in the industry, and you're a pretty solid dude. So I enjoy it.
Same to you. Back at you. Yeah, we'll definitely have to do some more talking. See if I can get up there to Minnesota. Check out the shop. I was meant to say that ventless spray booth is pretty freaking awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, it's working out really good for us, and I think for a lot of people it is a good. When I first saw that, I just, knowing the groups and stuff, I knew that there was a good market for them, and that there'd be a lot of people that would be advantageous if they're good, and it was just more like getting the word out. And I think as they get better at getting the word out as to what the benefits are of going that way, the more people will do it. Because like us this year in Minnesota, even though it was a warm winter, the amount of money that I saved by not having to blow air all day long outside and then heat it back up again was massive.
I had us when I was at CIC, I had them put one in the lab there because it was no regulation. You don't have to do any permitting, but you're only doing water based, and it's a game changer. They're awesome booths.
Yeah, and quiet too compared to the old booth. It's so quiet. We were just standing in there all weekend at that class, and we could just have a normal conversation in the booth as people are spraying, which is very, very nice too. So you don't get that droning in your ears and whatnot.
That what? Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'll let you get off here, everybody. Man, go check out Denny on social media. It's at Cabinet Renew MKTU, right?
Cabinet Renew, CABINETRENU. Yeah. The email, I think, is MKTO. That was from I don't know. I think that was from an email I had to use or something at one point in time.
Okay. Well, everybody go check him out. Denny's doing some awesome work. It does a lot of training classes. Hit him up if you've got any questions. We'll get you back on, Denny. Everybody, thanks for listening, and we will talk to everybody next week.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bearded Finisher Podcast. We thank everyone for joining. Keep hustling, keep learning, and never settle for anything less than your best. Remember, the path to perfection is a journey, not a destination. Until next time.